So you've just had a root canal. Whew, right? The immediate problem is solved, the pain is gone. But here's something that most of us don't realize. The root canal itself is really just step one. The real key to saving that tooth for the long haul is all about what comes after.
So that's what we're going to break down in this explainer. We've got 5 critical things you need to know. We'll start with why the job is far from finished. Then we'll look at the all-important seal, tackle the whole to post or not to post debate, get into the big choice between a filling and a crown, and finally wrap it all up with the one rule that ties everything together.
All right, let's jump right in. First up, the job's not done. You know, it's a huge misconception that once the root canal procedure is over, you're totally in the clear. Let's dig into why that's just not the case.
I want you to think about it this way. A root canal cleans out the infection and all the bad stuff on the inside of the tooth. But now, the tooth itself is basically hollowed out. It's clean, sure, but it's also vulnerable. So the real question is, what's going to save the actual tooth from fracturing or failing down the line?
And the answer is pretty simple. The key to long-term success is all about how that tooth is restored on the outside. Think of it like this. The root canal is the specialized crew that cleans out a damaged house. But the restoration, that's the filling or the crown, that's the construction crew that comes in after to build a new roof and reinforce the walls to make sure it's protected.
And that brings us to the most critical part of that new roof and walls. We're talking about the all-important seal. Honestly, the quality of this seal at the top of the tooth, it's everything.
Just look at how crucial this is. The research is crystal clear. A good root canal paired with a good protective seal has a 90% success rate. That's fantastic. But if that seal is poor, if it's leaky, the success rate absolutely plummets to just 44%. And that's even with a perfectly performed root canal. I mean, that is a massive, massive drop-off.
The real-world consequences are pretty stark. One major study looked at teeth that had a root canal but had to be extracted anyway. And what they found was staggering. A whopping 85% of them were failing simply because they didn't have the right protective coverage like a crown. Without that proper seal, they just weren't built to last, which of course leads to more pain, another extraction, and a way higher cost to replace the tooth. So we know we need a strong seal, but what happens if there isn't a whole lot of tooth left to build on in the first place? Well, that leads us right to the next big question. To use a dental post or not?
Okay, let's bust the biggest myth about dental posts right now. They do not strengthen the tooth. A post isn't like putting rebar in concrete. It's much simpler than that. It's just an anchor. Its one and only purpose is to help the new filling or crown grip onto something when there's just not enough natural tooth left for it to hold on to.
And believe me, the type of posts matters. The older, rigid metal posts, they can actually act like a wedge inside the tooth, which can lead to fractures that are completely unfixable. That's exactly why the modern standard is a fiber post. It has an elasticity that's a lot more like a natural tooth, so it flexes under pressure instead of just breaking. This dramatically reduces the risk of one of those catastrophic failures.
So, when are these fiber posts most useful? Well, the research shows they're especially effective in premolars. Those are the teeth right behind your canines, to help cut down on the risk of fracture. They also become critical when a lot of the tooth's natural walls are gone, and especially in a situation with what's called a decrownated tooth, which is basically when the entire top of the tooth is gone.
Okay, so we've covered the seal, and we've talked about the post. Now it is time for the final piece of armor, the big choice between a filling and a full crown.
Now, to make this decision, we've got to understand one key concept: cuspal coverage. The cusps are just those pointy chewing tips on your back teeth. So, cuspal coverage simply means that the restoration, like a crown or an onlay, wraps over and protects those tips. I want you to think of it like a helmet for your tooth. It's what stops a weakened tooth from splitting apart when you bite down.
So how does a dentist decide which one to use? Well, it all comes down to a really simple assessment of how much healthy tooth is left. If 3 or more of the tooth's original walls are still standing, a modern filling can actually be a great option. But if you're down to 2 walls or less, that tooth needs that protective helmet, a crown that provides that all-important cuspal coverage.
And here's why. A tooth that's lost a lot of its structure, especially one with a big cavity that cuts right through both sides, what dentists call an MOD cavity, is dramatically weaker. It's kind of like a wooden barrel after you've removed the metal hoops. It's fragile. The crown acts like brand new steel hoops, holding everything together and restoring its strength so it can resist fracturing. All of this, the seal, the post, the filling versus the crown, it all leads us to our final and maybe our most important point: the tooth preservation rule. This is the one guiding principle that's behind every single decision we've talked about.
After reviewing all the available evidence, researchers came to one very clear conclusion. And I quote, "The single most important factor is the preservation of natural tooth structure."
And that's really the whole game right there. Everything we've discussed flows from this one simple rule. The quality of the seal, the decision to use a post or not, the choice between a filling or a crown, it is all geared towards one single mission, preserving as much of your original natural tooth as we possibly can.
So the next time you or someone you know needs a root canal, remember that the procedure itself is only half the battle. The most important question you can ask, the one that really determines the tooth's long-term survival, is this one right here. What's protecting this tooth's future?